about ready to start the panel, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you the sort of moderator of the program, but I believe he's going to take, he's going to be our first speaker on the first panel, and that is S. Paul Revel, who is the Secretary of Education here in Massachusetts. And as a secretary, he directs all of the Executive Office of Education departments, and that goes everything from preschool all the way through college and graduate school. He's the governor's top advisor on issues of education and helps shape the Commonwealth's education reform agenda, including a recent piece of legislation, the Achievement Gap Act of 2010, which is the most sweeping educational reform legislation since the landmark Education Reform Act of 1993. He has held positions throughout the education system. I was interested to note that he is a former VISTA teacher, volunteer. He has also been a teacher, and he has also been an administrator in the school system. And he has led an effort to bring business and education closer together as the co-founder of the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education. And it is just my pleasure to introduce to you Secretary of Education in Massachusetts, Paul Revel.
Thank you very much, Kay. And thank all of you. Welcome to Massachusetts. On behalf of Governor Patrick and Lieutenant Governor Murray, I want to welcome you to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We think of ourselves in many respects as the birthplace of education in the United States, and we're delighted that you want to turn your attention to this topic and commend the American Bar Association for the focus and energy that you're going to put into this set of problems that we see as at the center of the challenge of preserving prosperity, preserving our democracy, preserving our way of life, not only in this Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but in the nation more generally. I'm going to say just a few words to tee it up and give you a little bit of a flavor for how we in the nation's leading education state, in terms of educational performance, see the problems that our panelists are going to be discussing today. And then I'm going to turn it over to what's a very distinguished panel of two presenters who are going to each outline their perspective on this issue, and then we're going to have a little conversation between them and then with you as members of the audience as we spend this time together this afternoon. The great challenge that we're trying to achieve in American public education is one of excellence and equity at the same time. Many people see these goals as complementary. Some people see them as mutually exclusive. But it's only in the past 20 years or so, I think, since we've adopted standards as the de facto and finally de jure national reform strategy, that we've put into law the notion that we should expect the same of all children in the education, and all means all. So here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for example, it was in 1993 that we began the process of setting a high standard of achievement, a standard of proficiency, and meaning that we expected schools to achieve that standard of proficiency for all of our students. And not only did we set the goal, which is relatively speaking easy for policymakers to do, but we committed ourselves to a substantial investment of financial resources, doubling the state's commitment, for example, in this case, to public education in the K-12 portion of the system. So we made a real investment in building the capacity of the system to deliver on that. Now we're about 20 years down the road in that mission of trying to educate all. And we take a look at the task that we were about. And we are proud, on the one hand, of the extraordinary performance that Massachusetts has had. We look at the nation's report card, the NAEP test. We look at SATs or APs. We even look at the third international test of math and science. On virtually all those indicators, we're at or near the top. The nation's report card, we've led it for 8 years running now. In 4th and 8th grade math and English. No other state has done it once. We've done it each and every time for the last 4 administrations. We're really proud of it. And yet at the same time, when we bear down on these results, it's quite clear and quite obvious that not every student is enjoying the quality of education that those high averages suggest. And we have deep, yawning achievement gaps that are as wide, if not wider, than the achievement gaps in most other states, even though the floor of achievement for our lowest performing groups is higher than it is in most other states. We've got these deep, persistent, disturbing achievement gaps. And our work in the Patrick administration since arriving here has been to attack those achievement gaps. What is it that we need to do to close those gaps? We're convinced that we got the goals right when we set about putting those goals in place in 1993. All means all, that's the right goal. It's not just the right goal because it now appears to be economically in our self-interest to do it, but it's always been, legally, at least since Thurgood Marshall's time, a goal that we should be aiming for. It's always been a moral imperative for us, a moral obligation that civil rights leaders, religious leaders, and others have reminded us of our obligation to give the next generation every chance we can possibly give them to develop their full potential. But what's different now in the 21st century is what's our moral obligation to do is now in our economic self-interest. We want to preserve the nature of this economy and the nature of this democracy. We're going to have to close those achievement gaps because there's nowhere in society for those who are uneducated to go at this stage. So we look at how we go about achieving this goal. If we stipulate that we believe we got the goal right, all students educated at a high level of proficiency, prepared for success, and by success here in Massachusetts at least, we mean the capacity to get and hold a 21st century job, a job that will enable somebody to support a family, the capacity to participate meaningfully in an informed way in a democracy and to be a leader in that democracy, the capacity to be head of a family with all the character and values that we associate with family leadership, and finally the capacity to solve problems that we as educators can't even conceptualize today, but we're certain our students will encounter down the road. So we want to prepare all of our students for success. We set that as a goal. The problem was we inherited a school system from another century, really from early in the 20th century, that did not have the capacity to do that. It had the capacity to produce a bell curve distribution in educational achievement and attainment. And that bell curve served us arguably reasonably well from an economic standpoint for the first 3 quarters of the 20th century, when we had a low-skill, low-knowledge manufacturing society. But as increasingly our place in the world economy became middle skill to high skill knowledge and skill, we needed a system that produced most of our graduates having those kinds of skills and that depth of knowledge, and we didn't have that. So setting new goals alone wasn't enough. We had to build a new delivery system. And we're not quite clear what that delivery system looks like. We're in what I think of as an experimental stage here in Massachusetts in terms of building out the education system in a way that enables it to deliver on the promise of our rhetoric, to do what we've never asked schools really to do before, which is to educate all of our students to a high level. And right now we have a system that's basically a one-size-fits-all system. It doesn't differentiate much between the different kinds of learners that we have. It works in a kind of agrarian time framework of 6 hours a day, 6.5 hours a day, 180 days a year, remarkably uniform around the country. This amounts to about 20% of a child's waking hours during the period of time between age 5 and 18 when they're in school. So it's a relatively weak intervention. So our theory of action here in Massachusetts is really twofold in terms of what we need to do. First of all, education is about teaching and learning, so we need to improve the quality of teaching and learning in every classroom, pre-K through higher education in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And secondly, we need to assure that children come to school on some kind of a healthy platform that enables them to take advantage of optimized instruction. And that's something we've not done. We've operated schools with blinders. We continue to ignore the correlation between socioeconomic status and educational attainment and achievement. It's an iron law correlation here in Massachusetts, as it is elsewhere in the country. And so if we're going to do something about that, if we're going to enable students to take advantage of optimized instruction, we've got to do something in our work to mitigate those factors that get in the way of children taking advantage of optimized instruction. In short, we need a school system that's going to meet every child where he or she is and give them what they need to get to the standard. Not in a fixed amount of time, but in whatever amount of time it takes to get there. To have a school system that will do for all children what those of us who have privilege routinely do for our own. So that's the goal we've set for ourselves. We live in a time of scarce resources. We're remarkably conservative about our tolerance for change in schools. So we move slowly, we move incrementally. But we've made some progress about which we're proud in Massachusetts, and I'd be happy to discuss later. But that, in this sort of lead state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is how we conceptualize the problem that we're going to be talking about today. So with that, let me change gears to my moderator role, and it's my pleasure. You're in for a real treat. We've got, I couldn't imagine a better panel to discuss the topic at hand. Our first speaker will be, and you have voluminous biographies, I understand, in your program materials, so I'm not going to try and give a full bio of each of these people, and we'd spend the rest of our session talking about their achievements. But let me just touch on a couple of highlights. Charles Ogletree is the current director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice at the Harvard University School of Law. He's the Harvard Law School Jesse Klomenko Professor of Law and Vice Dean for Clinical Programs. As you know, he's a world-renowned constitutional legal theorist and public defender. Professor Ogletree is exceptionally well published. His opinions are constantly sought by an expansive audience of legal peers, scholars, lawmakers, and the media. He attended public schools himself, and in Merced, California, he has a BA and MA from Stanford University, his law degree from the Harvard Law School, and he lives here locally with his wife. Our second panelist is James Heckman. You will all know that he is, among other things, a Nobel Prize winner. He is the Henry Schultz Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago. He directs the Economics Research Center in the Department of Economics, as well as directing the Center for Social Program Evaluation at the Harris School for Public Policy. He is, in addition, a professor of law and is internationally sought out for his opinion, his views, his publications on topics beginning with economics but ranging across a wide range of fields. So, if I may, I will welcome both of our panelists to the stage and introduce Charles Ogletree as our first speaker.
For being here today, I'm very eager, interested in listening to Dr. Heckman as well. I just want to say preliminarily how important this topic is, and appreciate the comments from the Dean earlier. It's quite significant because when she talked about Barbara Jordan, who is a great mentor and use those Boston University skills to be an effective advocate during the white work periods in the 1970s, and then Senator Congressman Ed Brooke, a dear friend and mentor who I see occasionally, who did the same thing as the first since Reconstruction elected African Americans in the Senate. He did a great job in his term there. It gives a sense of what's accomplished. And Gary Locke, who's a dear friend as well, who finally is where he should be the ambassador to China, a guy who's used his legal career to help in a lot of economic, political, and other issues. And thank Kay Hodge for this opportunity to speak. I'm going to talk about the road to Brown a little bit, and then about Brown, and then where we are today. And I'm going to be going lightning fast. I don't want you to be upset because I want to make sure we stay within our time frame. And this PowerPoint will be left with Kay and with the people here at Boston University, so you can study it more thoroughly than I'm going to give it time to review today. And I want to start with the Dred Scott decision. Everybody remembers about a century and a half ago, the court started issuing very explicit decisions about race and about integration, about opportunity. And Dred Scott was, I think, the linchpin that led to the Civil War. When the Supreme Court, O'Rourke, with an opinion written by a Harvard Law School grad, unfortunately, issued this opinion in Dred Scott, and the last paragraph said that about Africans, who they called property and not people, they had, for more than a century before then, regarded as being of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations. And so far unfit that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. That was our court in 1857.